Huge round of applause one more time for Mr. Karna Kota, our session moderator. Absolutely indeed. So, over to you.
Well, I think she has set a pretty high bar on what we can do to get you from sleep or any other such leisure activity. But I think what we can absolutely promise you is a very, very interesting debate, conversation around Internet of Things and how true is this ROI, like return on investment. In fact, as we were speaking to the panel, it was sort of evident that probably ROI is sort of a trivializing initiative, if we were to use that word. What we really wanted to bring about was the business value. Internet of Things, is it actually creating enough business value, and how you're going to measure that? That's probably what we are going to get to the root of in our conversations. And as I promised, it will be a very, very interesting session, peppered with some good real-life examples, customers who have done it, partners who have done it. And it will also be my privilege and honor to actually host this very esteemed panel with that conversation. So let's look forward to it. So without much ado, I want to bring someone on stage who has actually done it, who has lived it, who has gone through all the detraction that comes with, hey, are you going to really show up in ROI? And how does it matter to us as business users? So without much ado, I would like to get the first panelist on stage, Sanjeev Kumar, who is the head of manufacturing and plant at Godrej, to actually share his real-life story around implementing IoT. So Sanjeev, over to you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As Shrikant said, that I am from Godrej Industries Limited. We are a chemical company, oleochemical company, manufacturing fatty acids and their derivatives. Now, in any chemical industry, most of you are from industry, so I hope some of you are from chemical industry who can sync with what I'm saying. In any chemical industry, the processes are complex. They are interdependent on many parameters that are going around in a plant, specifically pressure, temperature, and volumes. There are a lot of interactions happening. You need experts to understand these interactions and help the process team to continue and give them direction. Typically what happens is, in a process plant, you have set processes, you have set parameters or instructions to be given, and the process people keep monitoring those things. When the process parameters deviate, they do something to bring it back to those levels, be within the band of values that have been set to it. All our processes, many of the manufacturing processes today in any industry are run by PLC systems and DCS systems. Now they throw a lot of data, every trending, every parameter, you get trends and whatnot. Now you get so much data that you are tired of trying to find out, making sense of that data and all those things. I believe that the shop floor people can monitor deviations and take care of the deviations, but it's not up to them to understand these deviations, find out the root causes, and then take implementation corrective measures on also. Normally it is done by an expert. And these experts today, like me, normally end up driving the production, being a production manager or a factory manager who doesn't have time to look at these trends at all. So what are we going to do with these trends and trend analysis? Who is going to look at it? Who is going to find out what's going wrong? Obviously not the shop floor. So I have been approached by many solution providers. Like, I'm going to bring the plant to your cabin, to your PC. But still, if I'm not able to look at it, give time to it, it was not making sense. It was not making a business sense. I could not convince my people to or calculate an ROI on that. What kind of benefits, 5%, 10% savings? How do I calculate these things? So many solution providers bringing all the data into different KPIs and then bringing onto your table was kind of daunting, and I didn't know what to do. Mr. Tarun Mishra from Coaxis approached me one day. We started off this conversation, what he has to offer. For some time, it seemed the same from like what other solution providers were giving. But he made one statement at the end of the conversation. He said, Sanjeev, you say you are an expert and you don't get time to look into all these trend analysis and do these things. What if I take Sanjeev to the plant 24/7? That was the time when I was fascinated. I said, let us talk more about it. He said, I'm going to talk about a solution that we are currently using at our factory. He says, you are an expert in, say, fractionation or distillation process. You understand all the interrelations of the parameters, how they interact with each other, what is going to happen in the next 4 years. You can predict looking at the trends. What if I put your mind or your thought process, map it into the system and throw it as reports which the shop floor can use? So what we did is, I was fascinated. This was a proposition which I didn't need to calculate any ROI at all. Having Sanjeev Kumar, 4 or 5 Sanjeev Kumars in each plant was fascinating for me. 24/7, not being me there. So we mapped the thought process as an expert in a fractionation plant in early 2010-11 at our Vikorogi plant. And I started seeing the benefits. Today, as I said, if I am an expert, finds time only if somebody can agree, normally it monthly reports. You only see the deviations in monthly reports and understand, oh, there is a deviation. We wanted to produce 1,000 tons. We are at 950. What happened to this 50 tons? But daily, the deviation was only 1.5 tons. And that never gets noticed. So, and analyzing at the end of the month also eludes you from finding out the root causes. Because already the data is lost, what kind of things happened, what did go wrong is already lost, and you never know why these things happen. The other important thing is, as a shop floor person, I am a person who have worked on shop floor and risen to a level of being a head of a manufacturing unit. I know if I am working on shop floor and if the deviation is so trivial, and if I could correct it by the end of the shift, of my shift, I would never report it. And many of these things go unreported. A small deviation by 0.5% normally doesn't get reported. So this was a solution which was compiling all those deviations, combined with my thought process of how these deviations impact in rupee terms or dollar terms, and throwing reports every 4 hours, every hour, every 8 hours, and helping the people to take decisions. Now, normally decisions were happening once a month. Now the decisions happen every 8 hours. I might be not making sense to many of you, but I will give you a very simple example of how the decision making has simplified. In our fractionation plant, normally a fractionation is a process where you separate things and purify into a 90% or 95% purity. So there is a certain recycle that goes in, which allows the purity to go up. Now, any fractionation plant requires a certain amount of recycle, minimum recycle into the fractionation plant. Any recycle higher than this doesn't affect quality, but impacts energy consumption. It impacts cost of production. But normally, quality is supreme in factories. So people do whatever is required to achieve the quality, because that is the first thing that they need to do. If I say that 600 kgs per hour was the reflux or the recycle, 700 kgs is where everybody will operate, because I don't want the quality to suffer. I just calculated the impact of this 100 kg, excess 100 kg, and we started populating the reports. Every day, the losses were coming to around 25 to 30,000 every day. My people didn't believe. They said, "Ye report galat hai, sir. 25 to 30,000 cannot be. 100 ki to reflex hai, zyada." And the biggest part is the reflex was variation from 600 to 900 kgs. Now, it is going also to 600 and also to 900. Now, this is where any process person will not touch or will not attempt to rectify it, because if you fall below 600, my quality is going to get affected. And it was throwing reports that 25,000 rupees is the loss every day. I didn't do anything. I didn't say anything to my people. My engineering guy and the process guy, they took the decision of understanding why this deviation is happening. Why are we deviating between 600 and 900? And they found out that there is a level indicator which is of a differential pressure type, which doesn't sense level properly. If I keep a radar type of level indicator sensing, it will give me an exact level indication and the controller will function properly. This level control, radar control was 3 lakh rupees. Now, if this report was not there, they would not have invested that 3 lakh rupees in that. So once this number was coming out, 25,000 rupees every day, they didn't ask me, they didn't even tell me, they changed the level control themselves, and the report started producing zero process loss or zero process. This is just an example of how the decision making can be empowered to the lowest level on the shop floor. So thereafter, we have started this implementation in our new Ambernath plant. We have shifted our plant from Vikhroli to Ambernath, and we have started in our sulfonation plant, and we are going ahead with hydrogenation batch area elsewhere. So after the other speakers have spoken, I can answer any of our other questions. Thank you.
Fantastic. So as we promised, we started on that note of a real transformation, that how it landed and how it actually made a dramatic difference. Notice the word that ROI pretty much came at the last. So we'll keep to the business value being sort of quintessential for making a transformation of this nature. And there is one other person that we will get onto the panel that has actually been helping other companies transform as quickly with their own products, with their solutions. And in fact, Sanjeev mentioned about Tarun. So I'll try to invite Tarun Mishra, who is a CEO, founder of Coaxis, to share how he has been helping so many companies. And then we can have an interesting conversation about how a lot of these decisions have not been so easy. So over to you, Tarun, to give us and share some insights. So with a round of applause, yeah.
Good afternoon. So I'm sure Sanjeev entertained you good enough, and very, very profound story which he shared. Thank you, Sanjeev. I have been given 5 minutes to do justice with the topic, which is how do we talk about ROI of something called IoT, right? So let me start with, and I totally agree with what Srikanth said. It's ROI is really talking, it's trivializing. IoT is a thing which is going to disrupt your business, which is going to redefine your business. This is what the eventual state of operation would be 10 years from now. So talking ROI is actually, it's not appreciating IoT and the Industry 4.0 and the impact of it on our life. But having said that, because the topic is ROI, and which still makes sense as a decision, what should be the basis? How do I decide as a user, as a manufacturer, as a supply chain head, how do I decide that, okay, I should spend 1 crore or 2 crore on a new technology? There has to be some basis. And hence ROI in that context is a good enough basis to begin with. And what I'm going to talk, I have only one slide. So next, okay. So let's understand, and I'm talking in the context of manufacturing environment, and I understand most of our audience is from manufacturing, so they would relate. Latency in decision making, something which Sanjeev also touched upon and we all can understand. Between an event which takes place on a shop floor and the time decision is made is huge. Sometimes it could be, and it's, as you know, in the best of the best plant in the world probably would have 1 day, and you can have 3 months and 6 months, a year also, depending upon the type of the problem, right? That is the one big cause of compromises which we are making and which we don't even know the impact of it on our business. Lack of visibility. Some of the example which you talk about, minor fluctuation which otherwise you would never ever come to know. However sophisticated your plant could be, it could be DCS, PLC, fully automated, MES implemented, does not matter. There are 10,000 deviations in a shift which happens, which impact your plant adversely. No plant can say that, I have DCS operated plant, everything is hunky-dory. It never happens. So not knowing in real time is a big compromise which we are making in today's world. Non-comprehensive KPI. Most of the time when I spoke, and all my customers are, billion-dollar companies who understand manufacturing, who have been born in manufacturing industry, would retire in manufacturing industry, right? So they say that, Tarun, my plant is doing very good. It was supposed to be producing 100 ton. We have already optimized and now we are producing 110 tons, right? And our asset utilization is already 99.5%. What more we can do? We ask simple question. Fine, your plant was produced 100 ton. You are producing 100 ton. Good, 100 on 100. Your asset utilization is 99.5 or 99.9. Extremely well done. But tell me one thing. Can you also tell me that in last 4 hours, how much excessive conversion cost has gone in your production? Are you measuring that also in real time or on day-to-day basis? Right? And that is something they are clueless about. So at the end of the month or at the end of the quarter, some ERP MIS will send, which is the average, that okay, the entire operation has consumed X unit of electricity and Y unit of water and fuel, and based on that you scratch why it went up and why this quarter we have incurred extra conversion cost, right? So the point is, if I do not have 360-degree comprehensive metrics which we are measuring every single minute, every single shift, every single day, then we are compromising again. And this is one of the biggest, but I have kept it to the bottom. The disconnect between shop floor and the top floor. The people at the top, as most of us know, they talk in economics. For them, plant is like a cash generating engine. Dollar goes in, dollar comes out. Correct? That's their language, that's their thinking, which is not wrong. This is very valid because at the end that's a business. While shop floor language is material comes in, material goes out. Right? I was given to produce 100 tons. Have I produced 100 tons, right? Now this is a huge disconnect. This is not a simple gap. There are two different languages, there is two different perspectives, there are two different thought processes, and that is again something which results into, manifest into, the decision making and how we are managing our businesses. So these are some of the causes. What are the impacts of it or effects of it? If you see, these are the various. These causes result into these kind of effects on every organization, every manufacturing factory, whether it's the underutilization of assets, whether it's excessive utility cost or your conversion cost, rejections or first time wrong or right, whichever way you say, wastage, deviation in throughput, right, and excessive WIP inventory, depending upon if it's a continuous plant or a batch environment, whether it's a discrete or a process. the impact would be different, right? Now, what we have done here, we tried to, from our experience, this is not a deep research done across the world, and I have put 500 people on publishing this research paper, and this is generic research. This is Covax's discovery from its 40 customers wherever we have implemented this solution in India and outside India. This is the data I wanted to share with you, which is as pure and as credible as it can be, right? We have realized that, a best managed plant which claims that we are operating at high 90s have an opportunity to improve as high as 30%. Where is the disconnect? If I am operating at 95%, 97% of asset utilization, where is that 30%? So what is happening? Recalibration of benchmark. What appears 95% is actually somewhere around 65 and 70s. So the remaining is not coming to our attention, and trust me, this is the gap, which is, I know it's unthinkable. I know many of you will challenge and doubt this data, but every single plant we have seen, and Sanjeev might share the plant which was running at 1800 kilogram per hour, the same plant which he was talking about. After a few months, it started running at 2400 kilogram per hour, right? Of course, slight modifications, as he said, discoveries and improvement. Same plant, without adding anything, has gone to that extent, right? And if that is the kind of improvement in asset utilization, how does it result into your saving? And I'm saying saving is only conversion and variable cost. 6% reduction or saving in my conversion cost is significant by any standard, right? Top line impact, 30%, because your asset utilization is free for 30% more than it was. The same logic applies in everything. Excessive utilities. We have seen 20% reduction in less than 7 to 8 months flat. Welspun as one of my largest textile implementation, and they are also one of the largest investment they have done on IoT, correct? In India, I would say, I can say so. Their water consumption has gone down from 65 liter per kg of fabric to 45 liter per kg of fabric in flat 7-8 months. They didn't have to hire world's best consultant. They didn't have to hire expert from outside. Our system tells them what is to be done, and their operator understand, the shop supervisor understand what is to be done, and that's how you improve. The impact of that again is 20% saving, and of course it has no top line impact for you directly. Same way reject first time wrong. First time wrong is improvement scope is 20%. In one of the best in auto industry we are talking, which says that my first time right has to be good, and in such kind of environment this is the impact. All my customers are Bosch, Cipla, Godrej, Tata Chemicals, Castrol. These are the kind of customer I'm talking about. So none of them are immature customer or a medium-sized company who do not know how to run their business. Each example here is from most mature environment you are seeing. The impact on bottom line and top line. Same way deviation in throughput. So that's simple. If I had to talk about ROI, which, as I said, I see this technology as a disruption. It's inevitable. All of you 5 years down the line will have such technology. The point is, can you make it today so that you are ahead in the curve? And if you have to convert it into ROI, this is the kind of approach we'll have to take. We have data, we have knowledge, we have experiences, we have platform where we can share our knowledges and experiences to help you out arriving at the ROI. With that note, we'll be happy to take on questions and while the panel discussion is on. Thank you.
Great. A round of applause. I think that was real, right? Like, what you saw was data. Thanks so much for painting that so well, Tarun. Real data, real insights translating to real business outcomes in terms of either saving costs or boosting productivity. All of them were super impressive. So you heard a real story of implementation. You saw a platform company talking about how they help customers make these kind of choices and quickly help them derive business value. But this world is not simple in terms of maneuvering. Like, you still need some guiding light, people who can consult, help you understand that. And the next panelist that I'm going to bring on stage is too good at just doing that, and he has helped several companies get to that. So I would like to call on stage Puneet Bhatia, who is the Director for IT Consulting at KPMG, to share some fascinating insights as to how he helps companies see through this. So Puneet, over to you. A round of applause.
It's like, sorry.
There you go. Don't have an IoT for that.
Yeah. So thank you, Srikanth. Good afternoon, everybody. So digital in KPMG, you know, so I came from a different world. I came from Cisco when I joined KPMG 9 months back. And I truly appreciate, you know, when I see technology, because I'm a very passionate guy when it comes to speaking about this subject. One key message, you know, I want to lay out for the audience is that Internet of Things, you know, is going to create a disruption. That's a given fact. It might mean that some of you, from a manufacturing perspective, may come up with products that have sensors embedded inside that, and as a result, you end up creating new markets. So there's a lot of revenue opportunities you can create, and GE, Siemens, all the OEMs have already started seeing the benefits out of that. The other example could be is a lot of you from a manufacturing entity perspective could see, you know, benefits come out from an operational transformation perspective. So, you know, those are motherhood statements, but that's actually what's happening out. But I think the way to explain out ROI, since this session is about ROI, is to literally talk about a practical example and help you see this from a business standpoint. Because the example I'm going to talk about is of a client who apparently is, you know, was on a verge of bringing Internet of Things in a very complex domain of mines. And those of you who understand underground mines or, you know, that kind of an operation would realize that it's a complete dark zone. And, you know, in our early days, we used to call Internet of Things is about literally bringing things that are not visible to a surface and make them visible. And mines is a classical example. So you'll see a lot of, you know, case studies come out from Rio Tinto, Chelopech mines in Bulgaria, and mines in India also starting to talk about how Internet of Things can transform their core operations. So I'm going to talk about that from an ROI perspective. The second thing that I was asked was to put together a framework, and that's a KPMG framework that I will speak about as to, you know, Tarun spoke about KPIs. And this is the conversation that we had with the CEO. How do you model these KPIs? Because there's a lot that goes as an input, then there is a process, and then there is an output KPI that eventually ends up impacting a business metric. It could be a cash cost, it could be a, you know, production number that you actually want to improve. So how do we model that out and as a result show the ROI? The other key question hence comes is, you know, how does it justify the investment? Because there are too many, you know, varying numbers that float out over there. But I'll just give the number that we're talking in this context is 25 crores were supposed to be invested in driving automation inside an entire mine setup. And that's a big number, 25 crores. And if you imagine, you know, this client would have ended up having close to around 15 odd additional mines to go for. They were simply looking at a capex that could have run into some 350 crores plus from a complete end-to-end IoT implementation. Now, if that's the number that we are talking about, it's not a CIO conversation, it's a CEO conversation, and perhaps it will eventually become a board conversation. But someone has got to justify the impact it will create into the business. So my presentation is going to talk about that as we go along. Now, for those who understand, I mean, I think there's some quality issue with the slide. In a mining context, there are two metrics that make a big impact. One is, if the ore grade declines as you develop a mine, the cash cost eventually goes up. These are inverse relationships, they follow with each other. So this is a situation the specific client has had. And in that environment, how do they bring Internet of Things, which helps them not only, and so the given constant is that you cannot just come up and say the ore grade quality is going to improve. The variable that you have is to basically improve the operations in such a way as a result and do it much better so that you're able to reduce your cash costs. And hence, as a result, be able to show justification in investment in technology leading to an end output, which could be a cash cost, which could be a production metric to look for. So in this case, what literally happened was to create a framework. And the framework was, I'm a black belt by, my early days in GE, so I understand this input, process, output, philosophy. So I always look at KPIs from this perspective. How do you model them in such a way that because you're going to get real-time visibility into KPIs, and in this case, the KPIs were around, for example, where are the, the machines inside the mine? What's the location? So using RFID, you could virtually figure out on a map, on a mine map, which equipment and which operator was in which section of the mine. That's number one. Number two is also about being able to monitor using, ECM integration and what's in the vehicles in the operating equipment is what are their parameters, the tire pressure, for example, the operating modes of the equipment. Is it stop? Is it idle? Is it idle with engine running, for example? Is it traveling with the ore, already collected? Many such things. It's also a lot about literally bringing, technology inside the mine, and as a result, start tracking, for example, are there any leakages that are happening? So, gas leakage, for example, is critical, and also being able to monitor the subcontractors, because in the mining environment, a lot of work happens through the subcontractors. Those are the critical inputs that go in terms of making an operations inside the mine more effective. And then as a result of it, what's happening is, what you're doing is you're basically taking the information from deep within the surface up to the mine operating command center. So you have a centralized integrated command center which is managing the entire operation. So there's a concept in production that you call short interval production control, which means that you actually monitor production at very short intervals. You get real-time information, it gets fed into the plan, and if there are any deviations, and Tarun spoke a lot about deviations, you're able to proactively plan against those deviations. So you could virtually reallocate equipment which is in a site X inside the mine to a different site which actually needs that equipment. So as a result, the process improves. Similarly, safety becomes critical, right? So hence, as a result, there are a lot of process aspects that start getting transformed, and I will not delve deep into that because there was a big engagement around that. But eventually, it leads to few output metrics getting affected. Now, output in this context could be a very simple metric, for example, that your planned versus breakdown maintenance, and in this case, it was reversed. The planned was 3% and the breakdown was 97%. That means 97% of the time, this equipment was actually was being maintained because it was breaking down. You actually you reverse it by saying that, because of better monitoring of the equipment condition, I will have more than 90% of my time would be on a planned schedule versus the breakdown will come down. So you kind of start giving more equipment hours back into the system. To another metric which actually means how much fuel are you consuming, because if you monitor tire pressure, if you monitor the operating modes of the truck, you're able to get better utilization with regards to how the trucks or how the equipments are actually consuming fuel, for example. So as a result, when you start putting the output metrics and the behavior modeling can happen, net impact obviously is about two things. Because of better allocation, better monitoring, the production goes up. That's in an example that KPMG was a consultant. Clearly, over a period of 3 years, the client, doubled up their entire mine production. And the cash costs fell down from close to around $58 at the start of the engagement to $39 per ton. That's the kind of impact it comes out. But what literally is sitting at the heart of it is being able to model these KPIs and really put their behaviors, their interactivities in that. And that's what starts talking about from a framework perspective, what will drive improvements. And when I kind of quickly look at it, because the objective here, the end goal was about how will we improve production. So it was a lot about 3 key metrics. Get the availability up, focus on, productivity, and the productivity here I mean by And in this classical example, it is about literally halving the mines, the number of operators that you're using. So in this context, I'm talking about a client who's actually been able to cut down 1,600 workers to close to around 900 workers. So whilst there are many other engineering changes that happened, but that's the kind of impact you see. So on a per worker basis, we're able to start seeing huge shifts in the productivity. Number of trips that actually are a key metric in a mining environment can actually be monitored, and then they go up. And the last one is more about the life cycle cost. So, these are expensive equipments, machines. They have to be maintained, and they have to be maintained regularly. Because of, again, bringing the Internet of Things into the entire mining context, you start seeing the life cycle cost. So fundamentally means that your replacement cost, the asset life has gone up. And because of the asset life actually going up, you're fundamentally starting to talk about less capex going in buying new equipments for the mining context. So what I'll basically summarize is to show you what eventually came out. And I'll just talk about one single thing. So I'll call out your attention to, the fact. The moving average this client had from a 12-month window, and just for a 50-tonner I'm talking about here, was roughly around 75.6 from an availability perspective. And anyone who is in an industrial environment will know 85% is a threshold that you want to run. And I've not put the variability into this because each of these equipments were running at close to around, at 0.10 to 0.15 coefficient of variation. But what it meant was, because of better visibility, each of the equipments we were able to figure out will release close to around ranging from 11,000 hours of equipment time back into the mining system. Now, if you do a simple back calculation, you will see if this is the available time of an equipment additional, and if you were to look at the productivity of an equipment which will be run for 70% of the time, for example, because you also do some other changes from an operator perspective, and if you were moving 45 tons per hour of ore out of the mine, that's a massive improvement in terms of what are the kind of production changes you will see over a period of time. So the net message I want to leave is that, when you start thinking an ROI from an IoT perspective, it starts being able to model out these KPIs well, because it's a significant investment. And they have to have a high impact. It has to be pivoted around a business problem, and in this case, it was cash costs production. But literally being able to track that output metric against which we will model the input and the process metrics, and then being able to clearly call out the impact right at the start of the engagement. That because of this much of improvement in the equipments and because of this much of improvement in the productivity of our workforce, we're going to see this much of an upswing in terms of our end business metrics. And hence, as a result, that's how, we've been able to kind of think through an ROI on what would be a classical, 25 crores kind of an investment in a single mine instance. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thanks, sir. Thanks, Puneet. Sorry. And as we look at moving on to shifting gears around just impact and ROI, to having customers who are obviously probably in the industry which goes through many cycles of transformation, that's the auto. And there's one company that has been sort of the linchpin of giving that kind of consulting help as well as technology direction. That's Capit Technologies. And we have the honor to also have the CTO of Capit Technologies, Shirish Patwardhan, to actually share with us some real-life insights and other cases of ROI and how it has helped many auto companies. So a hand to Shirish as well. Thanks, Shirish.
Yeah, so good afternoon. We have already heard a lot about the ROI on the IoT, use cases and implementations. I'm going to specifically talk about our experience and our work in the automotive side, more in the transportation side. And, it's really, it's been happening for last 10, 15 years. It's not a new thing, but it's just that now it's being called IoT, where you have a lot of sensors in your cars or in your vehicles, in your equipments, and you're sensing them, knowing what's happening. And as I said, when what is hidden surfaces, you realize there are different things happening, and you realize that something different can be done with this. Yeah, so quickly about KPIT, we have, I'll just leave it for 2 seconds. Yeah, so we have done work on the IoT side in India and abroad as well. So some of the cars, buses, power generation equipments, HVACs systems, and so here we had a lot of interesting conversations with our customers, especially related to the return on investment. And barring 1 or 2 customers, most of them actually had not done so much of work on ROI, to be honest. But it was actually coming in from their CEOs. They're saying that, okay, this is what we want to improve, and therefore you must manage it, and therefore you must measure it, and therefore you must sense it. Simple, okay? So what does IoT do for you? It basically gives you a way to sense, to measure, and to manage, right? So it really came from top down, where the CEOs did not really go too much deep into the ROI part of it. We were lucky to get that, but we are discussing with many other customers where this discussion is very much there. And the issues in this discussion, of course, we'll touch upon them in the panel discussion. And that's where the use cases for ROI are thin, are small, and the beneficiaries of implementing those use cases are different parts of the organization. So, if you are able to get all the organization together saying that, okay, this is a big use case that we should implement, and then the ROI works out very well. If that is not the case, it is very highly fragmented. The decision doesn't happen. And I think Tarun rightly said that it just takes a long time to take any call on that. So, so we are doing solutions on automotive and transportation. And if you see today, you see all these latest buses running on the roads. They are extremely heavily instrumented. There are lots of sensors in that. We don't have today, but it will happen. It will come very soon. That it will also monitor the passengers inside the car, inside the bus. It will also monitor the driver. The driver behavior has been modeled right now. So from that we come to know many aspects of driver behavior. What do they want? How do they drive the buses? What do they do with the equipment? What are their problems, etc., etc. So when you do this, there is a chicken and egg thing, right? You put some technology, you reveal something, and then you learn from it, and then you take your strategic call. So there is always a catch-22 situation. Unless you invest, you don't know. And you don't know, you are not sure about getting the output, you don't invest. So that's the sort of circle you're getting into. So we are wondering about this. We actually made one electric vehicle, full electric bus, and presented it to the Prime Minister in January. Now, we are thinking about what is the return on this investment. And we are very sure that this is the image of Make in India and green technology and transportation, disruption in transportation. So that's what we wanted to do. Of course, this is an example of IoT as well, because this is an extremely highly instrumented vehicle. It runs on batteries, but that's nothing new. But running on Indian conditions, running with Indian technology, running with Indian patents is something that we have brought to the thing. So with this, I think I'll conclude this. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Shirish. So I think we had sort of an interesting take on different elements, right from plant to mines. Like imagine mines with IoT, and then cars, and then of course Tarun had a whole bunch of other scenarios where we have helped plethora of companies. So one thing that sort of came common across all of these conversations was how should customers really think about ROI? Now I am using the word ROI because that's what we relate to, but in effect, if you saw the common thread in this entire conversation was about business value, a business transformation, or getting to do a process far better than what you had ever done before. So if you were to just look at it from the lens, I felt it would be a good way for our audience to understand how should they think about this value when it comes to it. So probably a question opening up with Shirish, and then we sort of move it to the rest of the panel. So Shirish, your take on how do customers think about extracting business value from IoT?
Right. So I actually touched upon it a little bit briefly. Basically, ROI comes from use cases of IoT. Okay. And as it happens, in one function or in one unit, you don't have like 50 different use cases. You have 1 or 2 use cases where the real value is coming out. The challenge there is that if you want to do that, you have to go completely vertically and implement everything in IoT. So it starts from sensors up to the analytics. And that sometimes is overwhelming. The cost of the horizontal platform, okay, that if you use it for just one use case, it doesn't give you the return on investment. So if you calculate it that way, that is definitely going to be a challenge.
Got it. No, great point as we look at it. I want to shift the gears a little bit and really take on the challenge of how you make this happen. You know, we all have intent, we all have seen what the power of technology is, but just making it happen is not always that easy. So for someone who has actually implemented it, Sanjeev, I want to just ask, like, when you went about this model and there was no clear ROI upfront and you had more detractors than supporters, how should customers and others learn from your experience? What do they think and how should they start thinking about this model?
It was a very difficult journey implementing such a small initiative even at one of our plants. But I'll take on with Mrs. Sirish. I agree with him. We all know that what gets measured gets controlled and monitored. So I'll try to give you one small example. Our industry was at Vikrogi, we shifted to Ambernath. Now at Vikrogi we had grown in a very heterogeneous manner. That time sensors and technology was not so big. Ours is an industry which is energy intensive, so a lot of steam and is used. So we didn't have even measuring ways. Not all our streams of steam usage was being measured at Vikrogi because it was costing, each sensor was costing a huge amount and we didn't want to invest in that. But when we shifted to Ambernath, I said everything should be measured. It was part of the capital cost, project cost that was being done. Once we did that, I just want to give you a figure. My specific consumption, specific energy consumption in terms of kilowatt hour per ton of product at Victory was 2,580 kWh per metric ton. Now, after installing all the measuring, each stream of energy of steam is measured at Ambernath. Now it is at 1880 units per metric ton. So this is the power of measurement, because once we measure, we know we can control it. What doesn't get measured doesn't get controlled. So I'll take on from Mr. Sirish. So, and also I would answer Srikant's question in the same way Mr. Sirish has said. It's a chicken and egg story. If you don't invest, you don't know. You don't know. So since this internet use of information, assimilating it, converting it to meaningful reports is the way that manufacturing has to adopt in the near future. So you need to invest, then you will definitely get the returns. That is my take on it.
Fantastic. No, thanks Sanjeev for that. And I think there is one thread that also emerged in pretty much all the conversation that was consistent. It's who really is the buyer? And this is a question I would want Puneet to be able to give us some light. Does it really matter in terms of ROI, in terms of implementation, who the buyer is? And how do customers and others who are looking at implementing IoT think about it as to who's my real buyer?
Yes, sir. What we are experiencing with all our clients is that the buyers are actually the business decision makers. Most of the programs that KPMG normally gets involved are fairly at a transformative level because they involve group-wide. They're not very specific to a single set of machines or plants, basically. They would be operations that will span, not just India, they will span across the globe. In that environment, there are too many questions that need to get answered. It's not a straightforward technology question because you will have implications in terms of organization structure, you will have implications from security policies, you will have implications, how do you buy technology, you will have change management issues to take care of, different clients, and a diversified client, for example, in mines, power, ports, transportation, logistics, might be running different kind of business domains. So, will they go for a single IoT platform, or do they really need to create a different architecture for their business? Hence, clients have too many questions on the table. And in that environment, what happens is, it's not just the CIO organization. Obviously, they are the originators of the thought process, but it's the business who more often than not gets involved with the decision-making process. More so if a technology is, very forward-looking. So I'll give you an example of technology which, many of you know is in Vimesh. LoRa is becoming more prominent these days, and with LoRa becoming, critical for networking on large areas, it's not a question that, just a CIO can answer, because it's a fairly significant investment. The business would get involved, because that's where the use cases will come from. So what we are experiencing is that the buyers are spread across. We have to influence a set of individuals, but clients, the decision makers are the CEOs or the promoters who eventually see value because of deployment of these technologies.
Fantastic. And I think that's common across, right? Any business transformation doesn't start just from an IT perspective. It always invariably comes from a business lens where we are changing the direction of the company or sort of an outcome. And that's an interesting tag that you made, Puneet, where I want to get insights from Tarun on this one. As you look at companies and as you go about implementing solutions, and you have plenty of experience there, where do you think these delays are? What really causes some of these delays? And is it just a perception of ROI, or is it that people haven't yet figured out business value? What causes these delays in implementation?
Interesting. So I will give you a very non-business answer to it.
Sure.
Right. If you have to decide for, so let me just take simple example. And this is true for probably all of us, if not all, most of us. So if my wife says that let's go out for dinner and to a fancy restaurant which would cost 10,000 bucks, what choice you have? To go there?
Yeah.
You don't think about ROI. You go, enjoy a good time, have fun with family, come back. Is there any harm in doing that way? No. Why? Because the intent is right. What is the intent of going that? Is having fun, spend good time with your family. Exactly same thing in business, unfortunately, does not prevail for various reasons, right? Covaxis, we have launched with Microsoft Azure platform,
Yes.
as you are aware of. We have launched 3,000 rupee per KPI per machine per month model. Trust you me that even for 3,000, most of the companies are taking more than a month to decide. I'm talking about 10,000 of dinner with your wife. So coming back to the harsher reality, that why it is taking so much of time. So A is that, many of us definitely want to make difference in the organization wherever we work. Because most of us are there, we are getting paid, and we want to make a difference, right? But the entire decision-making framework is such obsolete and old age that for 3, 4, 10,000 rupees of OPEX cost, I have to go and take permission of 5 different people. Maybe that will make them happy, maybe that will not offend them, maybe that is the need of my organization, that's the regulatory compliance of my organization. Now this is something which we need to, this is where, and whenever there are a multiple stakeholder, typically IoT kind of environment, when we started with a CAPEX model, which was that big bang, large investment, that would take 7 months. Considering that, we said, okay, why don't we do a small modular fractional offering to the industry wherein you can pay as little as 3,000 rupee and taste the blood, right? But wherever, and we are seeing the difference in the decision tree, but whenever there are multiple stakeholders, everyone has to be taken on board, everyone has to approve. That is something which is the bureaucracy and the political environment inside the company, and I'm using political environments underline, is very key, unfortunately, for India. So that I would say is, and second is in case of IoT, let's be honest and also fair. It's a new thing. So there is a lot of ignorance, which is also part of the user. They do not know whether we should spend, and if I spend, I have to justify to my management. So there is a lot of ignorance which we as an industry, we need to solve it in a more structured way. We try to help them out that, this is how you can start and begin. So probably it will be, it's from the both sides that how can you get out of that conventional approval mechanism and have a right intent and put your foot down and say, look, I want to experiment with 50,000 rupee. Do you have any problem? If it goes down, deduct from my salary. I'm just joking. It will never happen. At the same time, we have to come forward and say that, hey, you know what, I will help you, I will go that extra mileage and, do a POC, but don't do free. But do it as low as 50,000, a lakh, try to see the value and then decide fast. But taking decision faster is important.
Totally. And I think if you were to just look at it, probably not taking a decision is a much bigger cost.
Huge cost, and not only cost, it's the risk of survival.
And as of all technologies, that I think one of the key patterns has been anything that is disruptive takes that much time for people to embrace, adopt it in a mainstream level. But this is a technology, I think the panel itself has made it evidently clear, is going to become sort of as mainstream, as integral to your businesses. So spending more cycles just to get to an ROI is probably not the best. And that's a big learning I think we can all take out from there. Since we have a little short on time, what I would request the panel, as we go, and again starting from you, Tarun, is quickly like 2 top points that you want to relate to our audience out here in terms of when they look at decisions like this, what worked and how quickly they can make sure that something is a key takeaway when they look at IoT projects from your experience, and I think we'll share it across the panel.
Yeah, so quickly two things. So quickly 2 things in less than a minute I would say is, carve out your interest area, whether you are engineering folk or you are a production guy or a planning guy or a costing guy or utilities guy, whichever department you are coming from. Take one problem statement and then say that, okay, I just want to experiment, and that's the one. You define that. Don't worry about, trust me, the investment is not as much as probably you would think. It will be very minuscule. And the second advice, come to Coaxis. Problem will be solved.
Shirish would say something different. Let's hope so. Sanjeev, to you.
I think I'm a production guy. Say, if my boss is a decision maker, if he comes to me and then say, Sanjeev, Tarun has come to me and will this reduce 5% of our cost? I would say I don't know. So the bottom line is you need to have a vision and then push it. Because it's not costing you so much. You need to take that risk and then go ahead. Because as a production, I wouldn't know in the beginning. But now, after having tasted bread, so I would say yes.
Now every decision is taken by him.
Great. Puneet.
So I guess it's, the key message is look at your role in the enterprise. If you're a decision maker, if you're at a chairman level or a CEO level in this audience, it has a potential to address issues around profitability. So if that's the problem you want to solve, it can do it. So you could choose between hiring a consulting firm to do a 7-month study versus thinking, can operations be re-engineered, business models can be re-engineered because I have a technology or a set of technologies available. That's one. If you are a head of operations, like from a plant perspective, you will have different issues, quality issues, production issues, shop floor issues from safety perspective. Put those problems in the center and then put some thought process around that, pivot it around and see a solution. If you're a CIO, for example, for a large group, or an enterprise, you will have a different issues to solve about, which is about literally getting all the assets in the entire group hooked up from secure, from, visibility perspective, and then put a problem statement and then see what a solution emerges, because you'll have a plethora of solutions coming from different parts. Versus if, you're an organization that's actually looking at this as a market to sell, products, could be sensors, could be machines, etc., then you have a different problem to solve. This is from a go-to-market perspective. You know, how do I monetize? How do I bring in new revenue opportunities? That's what Tarun has to solve. For example, he has to sell, right? So there is a go-to-market for him. So depending on what's your role, and you know, think through that aspect of it. That's one message. I think the second message is it's about, you know, in today's world, money is actually the king. You know, so you will have limited capital. You will have an appetite that might, you know, allow you to do a big bang approach versus you might have to decide like, let me start small. But the intent has to be there to at least start. You know, make the start, put the use cases, the POCs in place, start having conversations. That will how you will, that's what's going to get you educated. And then that's the journey that starts, because two things will click and suddenly you'll see benefits and come out of it. So those are my two key messages.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Puneet, for that. And before I get to Shirish, since we will open up for just two or three questions, as we have very little time, please be ready with that before I let Shirish outline his two key takeaways for all of us. Shirish, over to you.
So I think one needs to be very quick, very narrowly focused use case, so learn fast, and then change your direction if you don't think that's working out very well. And this does not really need too much of investment. It just needs convincing a set of people and de-risking on your own. You know, so that's the way to go. With all technologies, this happens. This is nothing different in IoT. I mean, when the cloud came, it was the same thing, right? I mean, nobody wanted to experiment with cloud, but it's become a normal thing now. So it's the same trodden path. It just has to be done again.
Thanks so much, Shirish. And I think a round of applause for our panelists who have shared all these insights. And what I would welcome and just open up the floor for a few questions that you may have. And I think we'll have time for two or three questions. So please raise your hand, introduce yourself, and of course your question. Okay, if it had been super clear, that would have been fabulous. But yeah, there you see, sort of people. Can I?
A modest turnover like 20 crores or 50 crores feels that, okay, this whole thing is only for billion-dollar companies and not for small companies. So what do you have to say for that?
Okay, so the example which I shared and the 3,000 rupee which I quoted, actually you have mixed up smartly two things. So let me rectify the message. So the message was, the example which we shared was all capital expenditure. In fact, all those billion-dollar companies have spent crores on coaxial solution, in fact, right? So that's where those example and data were coming from. The 3,000 rupee model we have recently launched with Microsoft, and that is particularly targeted not only for the large organizations, but also small and medium companies. And in fact, in our portfolio in last 3 months, we have many small and medium companies of turnover is as low as under 100 CR, and who have spent 3,000 rupee and key KPI directly from the machine in real time, and that's like changing the whole dynamics and kinetics of their plant floor, right? So this 3,000 rupee was targeted for small and medium, and it's not actually meant for large. I want large organizations to spend millions and millions on us, right? So, but yes, so I just corrected it, and the benefit of this, which we promise, is under a month in case of this 3,000 model.
Great. Have you implemented anything for pharma company?
Oh yes. So in fact, our implementation is in Cipla, Sun, some of the name I can take, Ipca, Centis Pharma, and 3 of 4 is regulated plant. So, and the whole implementation is not only plant productivity and efficiency of the machines, which takes care of everything, like whether it's a changeover, whether it's a machine performance, whether it's a energy consumption, but also digital BMR, which you would know is the key need for the industry. So we have launched digital BMR, wherein all your deviation and exception management happens in real time, and which the data is directly captured from the machine itself. We'll be happy to talk more after this.
Great. One last question on the floor, and then we'll wrap this session up. I think we had one person behind. Yeah. Can you share the mic, please?
Yeah, I have a question to Mr. Tarun.
Sorry, can you be a little louder, please?
Yeah, it's a Tarun Mishra for Coasys. It is a wonder in a manufacturing industries. Whatever name you have mentioned, these are great companies in Indian scenarios. I would like to ask you whether this means for implementing your software or your this Coasys solution, do you require fully automation plant, or it is in a batch process, or I mean?
Okay, so since our solution is, and I would say that, I mean, so this is, allow me, because this is very sales oriented answer I have to give. So I don't want other panelists to feel so sorry, but quickly I will be as agnostic to Coaxis. Such kind of solution is agnostic to whether it's a discrete or whether it's the process industry. Also, it's agnostic to, or doesn't matter whether you are a process or a continuous, batch process or a continuous process. So that's the one clarification. Second clarification is, which is very generic, does it require the plant to be fully automated? That's a myth. You know, so if anyone tells you that first automate your plant and then think about IoT, that guy either doesn't know IoT or he is trying to sell you something. So the first and foremost is IoT concept, because IoT varies from sensor to all the way to analytics. It's the big game. Now, semi-automated or a very, very poorly automated plant also is our customer. Without implementing or doing automation in the machine, it's still possible to collect some data and some information which is meaningful for a business decisions, correct? So we have done implementation across the board, whether it's, yes, one thing is given, the better is your automation, the richer will be analytics. But that is not the prerequisite.
Great. I think we have a lot more questions, so we'll try and field it as we go along. But really, again, want to thank these esteemed panelists for sharing these insights, and a round of applause for them to cover all these topics in such detail. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
If I may please request our panel members to come together for a group photograph as well. And can we have a huge round of applause, because that was one interesting panel discussion, post-lunch panel discussion indeed. And on that note, I'm going to request you to please remain on stage one more minute as well. I'd like to invite once again Mr. Amir Khan to please come on the stage to present the token of gratitude to all of our panel members. Thank you once again.